This is Ladies of Faith with Nikkie Corbin, a program designed to instruct, edify, and encourage Christian ladies while lifting up the name of Jesus Christ. And now here's Nikkie with today's program.
Hello and welcome to today's program. We're excited to be here again with you today as we continue talking about the fruit of the Spirit. We've been discussing that for several programs, and we are on faithful or faithfulness is what the one that we're discussing now. As we explained in the last program, in the King James is referred to as faith, and we did talk about faith, but now we're dealing with faithfulness, as some believe that it could have been translated in that particular verse to faithfulness. So we're talking about being faithful. And we read last time from Luke chapter 12, and starting at verse 42, and we read the scriptures there where it talks about, where Jesus is talking about the faithful and the unfaithful servant. And we dealt with a very maybe hot topic at that time, because we discussed once saved, always saved, and discussed how it's very plain and evident here that that someone can become unfaithful. In other words, you can start out serving God and be in a relationship with Him, but then choose to turn away from Him, to choose to go another way. And that would make you unfaithful. And we see very clearly in these scriptures that if you do so, then punishment is coming. And of course, we believe that you're going to end up in hell, despite the fact that you had accepted the Lord at one time, because you didn't keep the faith. You turned away from it. And we dealt with that, and I pray that everything I said made sense. And if you have more questions, I welcome them, because I know there's a strong segment of the population out there that believes once saved, always saved. And honestly, I'm not interested in debates or arguments. I've had those in previous years, and they don't ever amount to anything. But if you honestly, sincerely want to know, then I'd be glad to point you to more scriptures, to show you other scriptures that show you can't walk away from the faith and still be okay with the Lord. And it is possible. It is possible to walk away. There are those that do turn away from their walk with the Lord. It's not because they weren't truly saved to start with. They truly were, but yet they went another way. And so I'm glad to discuss that further. So we were discussing, in that particular instance, we were discussing being faithful and keeping the faith. Being faithful and keeping the faith. In other words, if you quit believing, then you're going to walk away from the Lord. Yes, I've talked to people before who believe once saved, always saved, and sometimes they say, well, at what point in your sin, are you unsaved? How many sins do you have to commit? And when they say things like that, they're totally misunderstanding and totally not getting what we are saying. It's not after a certain number of sins. It's not after, it's not a particular sin or anything like that. It's when you quit believing. It's when you quit trusting Him for forgiveness and for salvation. And what I mean by that is that you continue to have that repentant heart. You continue to desire to know Him and to grow in Him. And so when you quit, when you give up, and you're no longer believing for that, and your sin no longer bothers you anymore, then you have walked away from the faith. And so we want to be faithful. We want to be faithful in continuing in the faith, in believing, trusting Him, keeping that faith. But today I'm going to turn to Luke chapter 16 and dealing with another aspect of being faithful. In Luke chapter 16, starting at verse 10, it says, "He who is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he who is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. If therefore you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another man's, who shall give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. I'm going to stop there. A lot is dealt with here, but I want to focus on, I want to start with this part. So when it's discussed mammon here, of course, this is regarding money. But as with a lot of things, we can look at it in several different ways. But regarding money, we're to be faithful in the money that we have. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about being faithful in the money that I have is tithing and offerings. And again, I'm probably bringing up another hot topic, because you have a segment of the population out there who are very offended by preachers talking about tithing, who are very offended who will say that, well, tithing's part of the old covenant, it's not for today. Foolishness like that I don't understand, because first of all, I wonder how they think the work of God is going to carry on if there's not financing of it, if there's not people who are faithful in giving. And I thank God for people who are faithful in giving. I mean, think about this. In a church, you have certain bills every month that are needed for operation. You know roughly what those bills are going to be. Some fluctuate, such as power bill, water bill, depending on, water's pretty consistent, but some of those things that maybe get used more at certain times and get less use at other times. There's some fluctuation, but generally what those bills are going to be. And so when you know that you have certain amounts coming in the tithes and offerings, and that's consistent, that helps you know what bills you're going to be able to pay. It helps you to, say, okay, I know, and I know for me, at our church, I always know the first week of the month. We have some people who get paid once a month, and in the first week of the month, we tend to have a bigger offering than the other weeks. So I know that first week, I'm going to be able to pay this bill, that bill. I know which ones I'm going to be able to knock out that first week, kind of, roughly. And then from there on, I know what it tends to be other weeks. I know the week of Radiothon, what that tends to be. And of course, sometimes it's less, and when it's less, I'm just like, ooh, this is going to be rough on me this week. I'm not sure how I'm going to pay these bills this week, because that was not what I was expecting. And then sometimes it's more, and then I'm saying, oh, thank you, Lord. I'm going to be able to pay these bills, and I might even be able to knock out a bill or two from the following week. And so that gets me real excited when I'm able to do that. But so I like the consistency. I like it when it's better. I really like it when it's better. But as long as it's leastly consistent, at least if it's what I'm used to. But those weeks that it's not what I'm used to, and I'm like, well, what happened here? And me personally, I don't know who gives what to the church. So when we have one of those weeks where I'm like, well, what happened here? I honestly don't know. I don't know what happened there. And I wouldn't want to examine and see, well, this one didn't pay this week. What's going on? That's none of my business. But I'm thankful for those who are faithful, who do give their tithes regularly. And they, sometimes maybe they give above and beyond their tithes, but they are least dependable on giving, a certain amount that they tend to consistently give. It helps so much with planning the work of the church and knowing, how certain bills are going to be paid. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that faithfulness, and I'm speaking as somebody who I'm the one that pays the church bills and the radio station bills and all those things, and so I appreciate faithfulness in giving, and so, but there are those that want to say, well, we're not required to tithe anymore. And of course, like I said, I don't understand that, because I know, even before I was the pastor of a church, I understood that churches had bills and they had to be paid. This radio station has bills and they have to be paid. That's why we have radiothons, and we ask people, please pray about giving and being a part of it. We need your support, and we need support that becomes consistent. We need people to start giving and give regularly, so that we know those bills are being met. And again, we have people who do that. We have people, we announce this every time we do Radiothon, we have people who, before we even get started with Radiothon, they've already sent in their donation. They've already, either put it in the mail and sent it in, or they came up to us at church if they attend our church that week and said, by the way, put me down for such and such. I'm bringing it in this week, and go ahead and put me down for it. We have people who go ahead and give with their credit cards first of the month, and they specify it's for the radio station. And thank God for that. I'm so thankful for that. But I believe there's others who God's calling to be a part. There's others God's calling to be a part, maybe here and there. Maybe you're planted in a church that you give regularly to, and I pray you are giving regularly to whatever church you attend, and you're doing that. But God's on occasion may be saying, but I don't want you to give such and such to this ministry too. Maybe it's a one-time offering, or maybe maybe God's saying, I want you to be a regular giver. I want you to give regularly, monthly. I want your offering to be one that they can count on to pay the bills. That's needed in ministries. That's needed in churches. That's needed in ministries. That's needed in this radio station, is those gifts that are dependable, that we know they're coming, and that help that helps us to know what to count on in the future months. But when God deals with this, and people sometimes don't want to give. They don't want to give to the work. They say, I can't afford to. I can't afford to give. Well, you know what? We all have bills to pay. We all, have, there's those that, they have plenty of money, and it's not a struggle to give. But for many people, it is a struggle to give. I could easily look at our tithes each month and think, well, I could have used that to pay this and this. But I always, first of all, I figure that first of all, my heart is, I want to do what's right. I want to give. I want to be a part of it. I desire to give to the work of God and see what happens. I love doing that. I wish I could give more. But also, there's the part of me that says, Lord, if I'm not faithful, then, I might suffer from that. And I figure that if I use that money for something else, I'm probably going to have something else come up that's going to need, fixing. Something's going to break down on me or something. And then I'm going to be like, well, gee, I could have given to the work of God, but instead I'm dealing with this issue. And so I always want to know I did what was right as far as my giving to the work of God. And if something does break down and I gave to the work of God, then I can go to God in good conscience and say, Lord, I need your help. I need your help here. And whereas if I robbed him, if I didn't give to his work, I'm going to have to first say, Lord, I'm sorry for not giving to your work like I should. But I have a need here, financial need, and I need you to help. I don't want to rob God. I don't want to be guilty of that. But I think a lot of times what we see is that it deals with the heart issue. When we can't let go of our money, we got to hang on to it. And like I say, I understand some people struggle more than others because their finances are such as they are, because they are really just barely getting by every month. I'll tell you this, I've heard many testimonies of people who were barely getting by and they started tithing, and then they were finding themselves able to give more and finding that the money lasted better than it did before. God does miraculous things. That's what I say. I want to be in a place where I can trust Him with my finances, where I know I've done what was right as far as giving to His work, and then let Him take care of me from there on out. And you know, that is such a better position to be in. And I've always seen God come through. God is faithful to supply our need, but He's asking us to be faithful in giving to His work, being faithful in that. And notice in verse 10, and I'll kind of bring this verse up again in a moment, he who is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. Sometimes, you know, when we have a little, are we faithful in what we do with it? Are we faithful in that little bit? You know, can God trust us with more? You know, so sometimes we think we know our hearts, and we think, well, you know, if I had more, I could, you know, I would do this or I would do that. And we boast of what we would do for the work of God if we had more. But we're not faithful in that little bit. You know, if it's difficult for you to give that $10, don't you think it's going to be difficult to give 100? If it's difficult to give that 100, don't you think it's going to be difficult to give that 1,000? You know, the bigger the amount, it doesn't suddenly become easier to give. In fact, if, you know, the devil makes sure it's not easier to give just because you have more there. But it's a heart thing. Will you trust God with what you have? Will you give of what you are blessed with and trust Him with the rest? And God sees those things. God sees our faithfulness in those things, and He will bless. He will bless. You know, like I said, I've seen people with very little, but I've seen it stretch out so much further because of their faithfulness to giving to the work of God. And that's where I want to be. I want to be obedient in giving to His work like I should. So we can talk about that, being faithful in our giving. But really, anything we have, we should be faithful in what we do with it. Faithful with our time, the way we spend our time. And, you know, not that it's wrong to spend time doing fun things or enjoying your family or whatever it may be like that. But make sure you have time for the Lord. Make sure you have time for reading His Word and studying His Word. Make sure you have time for praying, talking to Him. Make sure you have time for going to church if you're able to go to a church. Make time for those things. Be faithful with how we spend our time. Be faithful in the things that He's given us to do. You know, if He's given you a calling in your life and He's told you to do something, be faithful in the doing of it. You know, we can't be halfway in. If God's told you to do something, do it and do it faithfully. And don't let your doing it depend on a pat on the back. Don't let it depend on how much attention you get, how much popularity it brings you. You know, don't let it be based on man's reactions, but be faithful in what He's told you to do despite man's reactions. You know what, Scott and I, we've started the church in 2004. And along the way, there's been times where in the flesh, it would have been easy to say, I quit, I give up, this is tough, this is hard, I don't want to continue doing this. There have been times when just 2 or 3, 4 maybe show up to service and we're just like, what? Why? And so there's those times when in the flesh you could say, I quit. But instead we've always felt like that was just the thing we were supposed to do, to continue on, to be faithful in that, to continue on going along. We've had people in the church who have joined us and who have, agreed to be faithful, to just keep believing, to keep coming, to keep lifting up His name, to keep believing Him. And sometimes there's those times when you're being faithful, you're doing what's right, you're doing it, and you're thinking, Lord, I'm being faithful. And you wonder, well, why does anything happen? Well, you just keep on being faithful. You just keep on being faithful while God's also working on that patience in your heart, in your life. Continue to be faithful, and then see what He does, when He does it, how He does it. I assure you, He will show up. You just keep doing. Sometimes God maybe has given you a gift, something to do, a talent, an ability to do something. And not everything is about being on the platform. We think, usually when we think about working for the Lord and we think about talents or anything like that, we may think, oh, well, I can sing, or oh, I can preach, or oh, I can teach, I can play an instrument. But there's so much more. There's so many other things that people can do for the work of God. And not all of it involves being on a platform. Not all of it involves even being out in the spotlight where people see you. But be faithful in what God's given you to do. I'm reminded of, there's a lady that we go to the kids conference in Baton Rouge every summer with our children, and they have a lot of people, of course, working to make that happen. And one of the ladies who is a wonderful lady she actually came to our ladies retreat last time, and I was privileged to get to know her a little bit better and talk to her more. But she works in the cafeteria. And I think she kind of oversees the cafeteria, the meal planning for the kids and making sure all that happens. And she kind of commented to me, she said, I'm not a kid person really. So, I feel like I'm better in the cafeteria. In other words, being out, actually working one-on-one with the children and being involved in the activities and things like that. She said, that's not really me. She wants to be a help. She wants to do something, but that's not really her. So she said, but I'm good at food. I can do this. And so how she can help and support their kids ministry is by working the cafeteria, getting people in there early in the day, chopping up food and cooking it and having it planned and ready to be out. That's what she can do. And she's faithful in that. She's faithful in that. Since I've been going to IKC, I've seen her there working the food and everything. So she found something that she's able to do to help the ministry. It's not something that puts her on a platform. It's not something that everybody sees her. She's not out there on the playground where everyone notices her with the kids and stuff like that. She's in a cafeteria, behind the closed doors, mostly cooking, except for when she comes out to serve the food. It's not a spotlight service, but it's something she's able to do, and she does it well. And I believe, I think that's wonderful. I think that's wonderful when people, if everybody was the preacher and everybody was the singer, I remember one time we would have church plays at Christmas. And we had a lady in the congregation one time, and Scott was asking her, he said, "You're not going to be in the play this year?" And she said, "Well, somebody's got to watch it." And we were like, "Well, yeah, you're right. Somebody's got to watch it." And so, her place, she felt like, was to be in the audience, not up on the platform. and we kind of laughed about her saying that. But honestly, everyone can't be on the platform. But the work of the church is more than just what's on the platform. Who's the one, for our church, who's willing to work the bookstore? Who's willing to greet people as they come in? Who's willing to clean toilets? We always bring that one up. Who's willing to sit with the kids if they have to go to the overflow area? Who's willing to run a camera in our church? That's a big thing. We need people to run the camera. So who's willing to work a camera? Not a lot of glamour to it, but it's a work that is greatly needed, and it needs people who are faithful to do it. It's so hard when if you show up, if you run a church and you have people who are supposed to be doing certain positions and you show up and they're not there. And you're like, well, who's doing this? Well, who's doing that? Let's move things around because we've got to have someone doing such and such. It's not all about glamour. Really, none of it is about glamour, but people tend to think the things on the platform are glamorous, even though they're really not. Some churches make it glamorous, but it's not if you're truly doing what's right. But what many churches need, not just Truth Chapel, what many churches need is people who say, I'll be faithful in what I'm able to do, what God's called me to do. I'll be faithful in my attendance. I'll be faithful in my giving. I'll be faithful in praying for the church. I'll be faithful in, if God allows me to do a particular thing, whether it's cleaning toilets or passing out tracts or greeting people as they come in. I'll be faithful in whatever it is that God's given me the ability to do. Or for this lady that's mentioned at IKC, I'll be faithful in working at the cafeteria. Whatever it is that God's told you to do, be faithful in it. And it says, he who is faithful in the least is faithful also in much, and he who is unjust in the least also in much. Now I'm about to run out of time, so I want to reread some of this real quick again. And then verse 12, if you have not been faithful in that which is another man's, who shall give you that which is your own? We have to be faithful in the things that we have before us. And the things, the abilities that we've been given, the money we've been given, the time we've been given, we have to be faithful in those things. There's no other way around it. God wants faithful servants. So as we close, as we come to the end of this program, I pray that that God is encouraging you right now to, maybe you haven't been faithful, maybe you haven't been dependable on certain things in your life, and God's showing you now's the time to say, Lord, I'm going to do what you've told me to do. I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to be faithful. And again, as we say with all these things, we can't do it in our own flesh. If we try in our own ability, we'll find ourselves falling short. But if we trust Him and say, Lord, help me. I know you pay the price for me to be faithful, as well as all these other things, and I want to be faithful, Lord. Help me to be faithful to you, faithful to your work. Let Him grow that in you. Let Him develop that in your heart and life. We're out of time. I pray that you've been blessed and encouraged, and I pray that you're going to tune back in with us next time.
Hold on the word. She laid hold on the word, and it worked for her. Oh, yes, it worked for her.
This has been Ladies of Faith, hosted by co-pastor of Truth Chapel, Nikkie Corbin. Nikkie invites you to write to her by emailing nikkie@truthchapel.org, that's Nikkie @truthchapel.org, or by sending a letter to P.O. Box 1905, Spartanburg, South Carolina 29304. Tune in again next time for another special time for ladies on Ladies of Faith.
Oh, yes, it